Sometimes you just want a very simple way to sell a product on your website without having to go through the extensive work of setting up a full-fledged store using WooCommerce. You need something quick, simple, yet effective. And if that's what you're after, you're in luck. Hi again, I'm Peter from the Ultimate WordPress Guide, and today I'll show you how to build a WooCommerce one-page checkout with nothing more than Elementor, WooCommerce, and Piotnet's Form Builder. Now it's important to note that even though this tutorial covers the Form Builder functionality with Piotnet add-ons for Elementor, Piotnet also has a standalone WordPress plugin named Piotnet Forms, and it's compatible with any page builder. Both of these have a free version that you can download from the WordPress repository, but to get the maximum power and to use most of the functionality described in this video, you'll need the Pro version. Now if you're new to Piotnet add-ons and forms, head over to their website and grab your copy. I've put a link in the description along with a coupon code to gift you an additional 10% off your purchase. These are affiliate links, so if you decide to purchase, I'll receive a commission at no additional cost to you, of course. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up so that others can also benefit by having this recommended to them. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, tap the bell to stay up to date with all of our newly released content. So let's get started. Now over here I have a very basic page layout, and this is not a product template or an Elementor template of any nature. It is a simple Elementor canvas page that I've gone ahead and I've built a few things on top of this. Nothing really to focus on here, that's standard stuff. I've put in a header there with a menu, and I've put a hero with some text in it, an image, and then some text down here. But the real power is in the section below. Now what's important to note here, building this page, I used very little to almost no WooCommerce type widgets or elements, with the exception obviously of the checkout, the WooCommerce checkout widget. Everything else was built using Piotnet form fields. So over here I've got a image selector field where I can select the color of the iPhone that I'd like, and as I change through each of these images, you can see that the order form also dynamically updates along with the price that it actually pulls through from a calculated field down below. Next down, I've got a capacity field for the size of the iPhone. So if I select a value there, you'll notice that the price updates, and it also updates in the order form. I've put in an additional number field, which then gives me the ability to add or remove the quantity of the products that I want. And then with some conditional logic, I've added in a field where I can specify certain accessories. So I've got a couple of options here. I've got some AirPods, I've got a Pro case. So if I select one, you'll see the price increments. It updates the accessories total and the grand total, and the order form also updates. So as I keep adding more products here and I add additional line items, I can add as many as I want in terms of the number of accessories that I want. Everything updates dynamically. Now it's important to note here that this is still driven by WooCommerce, and I need a product or a base product to start with that will give me a base price. However, everything in this form that calculates into this field will overwrite the default price, and I'll show you in just a moment when we get to the back end exactly what I mean by that. On the right hand side then, I have the WooCommerce one-page checkout widget by Piotnet. And all it is effectively is an embedding of the WooCommerce checkout page. So you can see all the standard stuff here, billing details, no shipping details, and I'll show you why. There are a couple of cool settings within this widget that I can adjust to make available or remove some of the fields that I don't necessarily want to see as part of this. I've got my billing details, additional information. I can enter a coupon code if I have one. So I've got my order details down here, I've got the price, and then I can add my different payment methods. So I've got Stripe payment configured here at the moment, but you can also add a couple more. So let's jump over to the back end and just take a look at some of the settings that are required before we get started digging into the details of how to actually build this. So first things first, I want to head over to my WordPress dashboard and into the Piotnet add-ons area and into the settings. And I want to double check and ensure that all the required fields under the form builder section that I will need to build this are selected. So amongst the things that I'll use over here is obviously the form builder. I'll use some conditional logic. I need the WooCommerce checkout. I'll use the Stripe payment. I haven't configured the PayPal payment, but it is an option available. And as you can see, with the Pro version, you get a number of additional extensions and widgets that you can also use with Piotnet add-ons. The next one is over to my Piotnet add-ons settings again. And if you scroll a little down, you'll see all the integration settings. And over here, I need to put in the publishable key and the secret key for my Stripe integration. And as I mentioned before, there are a couple of other payment gateway options available that I can set up and configure to use as part of my checkout process. Now, as I also mentioned a little while ago, this is still driven by WooCommerce and it needs a product. So what I've gone and done is I've created a single product, which is just an iPhone 12 Pro, and I haven't configured a lot of specifics down here. I've given it a title, so it generates my URL, product URL. I've given it a price, I've given it a short description, and I've given it a product image. The product image is not really necessary because I'm not going to use it in this instance. The image that I've actually used on the front end is just a normal image. As I said, it's a normal Elementor page, landing page, whatever you wish to call it. I can build it in any way that I effectively want and then add the form and the checkout elements inside. So that's pretty much all the prerequisite settings that I need to adjust or configure before we can get started building this one-page checkout. So let's hop over to the back end and onto the Elementor canvas, and let's take a look at how this was built. So as I said a moment ago, this is just a standard Elementor canvas page, nothing fancy, no product templates. And I've just gone ahead and I've put in a few standard Elementor elements. I've built a header, I've built a hero section, I've placed an image and some text and a review. And then I've gone and put in the necessary form fields that will drive the WooCommerce checkout. So let's start from the top. So right at the top, I created an image select field. I'm going to say this a couple of times. If you've seen some of my previous Piotnet videos, very importantly is the form ID. And the form ID will be consistent across all of these form elements, repeater fields, calculated fields, as well as the WooCommerce checkout field or widget. So I've got the form ID, I create a form field, and this is an image select field. I've got some options, and I've got the 4 images that I need to be associated with these options. Now, very importantly, and this is something that tripped me up while I was making this video, and a shout out to the Piotnet support guys that helped me to resolve this issue pretty quickly. So when I select the options or place the options here, I need to give it a label and a value pair. Now, because the base value or the base price of this product is the same across these options, I need to give it some sort of an indicator that it needs to differentiate between the different values because they can't be exactly the same. And what they've actually showed me is I need to put, or you need to put, a character behind each one of these value fields. Now, this won't have an impact on how it calculates the value in the calculated field, but it is important for you to note this so that you don't get tripped up as well when you try and create these with a standard price and then it doesn't want to work. Okay, so that's what I wanted to draw your attention to. And then down here, I want to send the data by label. Now, if I look at the label says blue, graphite, silver, and gold, and that's what I want to display in the color section. I don't want it to say the price because the price is already captured in the total field. And that's all I need to set up on this field. So next over, I've got the capacity field, which is just a normal select field. Again, I've got the form ID that's the same. I've given it a unique field ID. I'm showing the label, and I've given it some options there as well. Now you'll notice that the first option has a 0 value, and that's fine because the base price of the product is 1099 and the standard capacity in which this comes out is 128. So therefore I don't want to add any additional value when I select the base product with the base capacity. So that's a 0. So that's my label, that's my value. For the 128, the value is 0. For the 256, I'm adding an additional 200. For the 512, I'm adding an additional 300. And again here, I want to send the data by label because I want to show the size of the product, not the price of the product. So next over, I've got the quantity field, which is just a normal number field, with the exception I've activated the plus minus button over here, which gives me the option to style it in the fashion that I've done. And again here, the form ID is exactly the same. So next field over is just an acceptance field. So you've got an acceptance field option there. I've got some text. And what I've effectively used this for is to drive the display of the field that follows. Now in this instance, this is not a normal field. As you can see, there are a couple of fields that are within this, what we call a repeater field. So I've created an inner section, and inside of that inner section, I've created a couple of fields. Now I'll show you in just a moment what I've done on the repeater field settings. So here I've got another select field, and I've given it a couple of options. Again here, because I don't want to display by default the first accessory value, which will automatically jump to the price there, I've just given it 1, 0 value and label pair. Next up, I've got the 3 accessories. You can add as many accessories as you like. So again, here I have a label and a value pair that will drive the price. And then I've got a quantity field, another number field, which is okay. I've got a calculated field over here where I take the accessory type, which is the first field, and I multiply that by the accessory quantity, and that will give me this value. Now, just to jump back over to the repeater. So on this section, it's important that I define in Piotnet Forms that this is a repeater. So if I go onto the inner section here and I hop over to the PAFE menu, you'll see that there is an option down here to create a repeater, a form builder repeater. Now I need to enable this. I need to give it the same form ID. I need to give it a specific repeater ID, which is important because we're going to use that in a little while, which generates the shortcode. And that's also what we have to use when we want to add all of the details to the order form. I'll show you when we get to the order form how that needs to be configured, and it's very important that I add the repeater field along with all of the fields that it needs to calculate to show everything in the order form correctly. So that's my repeater field, that's the settings. Now 2 more things that I need to do is I need to add triggers. I need to add the ability to remove a trigger or remove the repeater field, but also add an additional repeater field. Now if I just hop back over to the front end, you'll see what I mean. So if I click on add accessories and I add an additional one, it'll continue adding a new line as long as I keep clicking the add more button. And then I've got a trigger that can also remove each of these additional fields. Now what's important to note here is whenever I create these repeater triggers, the trigger that closes or removes the repeater field needs to sit inside of the repeater field, whereas the one that adds needs to sit outside. Now let's look at this. So this is just the standard Elementor icon. You go and select something from the icon library, or you can upload an SVG file. But again, if I head over to the PAFE menu and I scroll down to the form builder repeater trigger, again here I need to enable it first. I give it a form ID. I give that repeater ID that we've specified on the inner section, and the action that I want to have in this case is when I click that icon, it needs to remove the repeater. Now if I move over to the next one, again over to the PAFE menu, down to the repeater trigger, same thing, I give it the form ID, I give it the repeater ID, and in this instance, I want to use that to add a new repeater field. Now the last thing I need to set up on this repeater field is the conditional logic, and that's the conditional logic that drives that when this is checked, it displays the repeater field, and if it's unchecked, obviously, it doesn't display the repeater field. So I go onto the inner section, and I go over to the PAFE menu, and I go to the form builder conditional logic, and here I configure the form ID. First off, I enable the conditional logic, I select the checkout form ID, and then I add the first parameter that says if the iPhone accessories, which is this acceptance field over here, is checked, then display the field. Now if you remember, we've got the trigger that sits inside of the repeater field, but this sits outside, so I have to do exactly the same for this button as well. So I've set up the conditional logic there. I jump over to the button that sits on the outside, go to the form builder conditional logic, and I do exactly the same. So I select enable, I select the form ID, and I say the same thing. If the iPhone accessories is checked, then display these. So these two effectively will work together. When that field is checked, both of these will display. If that field is unchecked, both of them will be hidden. So then I've got 2 calculated fields here, and I've used intersections just because I wanted to split the heading that I've placed and the actual calculated field. So nothing fancy here, that's just a normal title widget or normal heading widget that gives me some text. You can put in there whatever you like. But on the calculated field, same thing. I've got a form ID, I've got a field ID. You can see that it's a calculated field. And because I focus on the accessories here, I want to calculate all of the values from the accessories section. Now, how the repeater works is it captures the value in each of these repeater items. The more repeaters I add, the more prices it'll add, and the accessories total is effectively just the price. So the accessory total field here, you'll note, is exactly the same as the shortcode that I have inside the repeater. So the more repeaters I add, the more accessories it'll add, and it'll incrementally add all of this up and also update the order form. Now on the grand total, another calculated field, but here I've got some expression that takes all of these fields into account. So I've got the phone color first off, which is the base price of my product. Then I also add the capacity. So if I change that capacity, it needs to add that value, if you remember from earlier. And then I need to multiply that by the quantity that I select based on this field. Now all of that is the first part of the expression. And once I'm done, I also want to add the accessory total, which is this calculated field over here. And that's really all I need to do on the form side. You can do a lot more. This is just a simple example of using a couple of standard fields, incorporating some repeater fields, calculated fields, to drive the total and to drive the content that I want to see in the order form. So next I'm going to jump over into the next one, which is the edit WooCommerce checkout. So if I just go to my icon library and my widget library, you'll see that I've got a WooCommerce checkout widget there that is part of the PAFE form builder. So let me just scroll down here and I go to the PAFE form builder area, and right there you can see under the sales funnels I have the WooCommerce checkout. So I've just gone ahead and I've dragged that onto the page. Now what's important to note here, you'll see that it's got pretty much the same styling as the rest of the page, and it doesn't happen by default. In fact, if I select this and I go over to the Advanced tab and onto Custom CSS, I'm just going to copy all of this real quick and I'm going to cut it from there. And you'll see that it changes back, and this is actually the default styling that you get when you place this widget in. Now, if you're familiar with some CSS and you're familiar with some of the functions in WooCommerce, you can very easily style this to your liking. So I'm just going to drop that back in and you can see that it changes. So I've made some changes to the text and the colors and the font sizes and weights and so on. And I'll paste this into the file. I'll share all of the templates after the video. You can download them from our website, ultimatewpguide.com. And then from there on, you can use this as an example and extend on it if you need to. So if we look at the rest of the settings, I'm just going to go back to the content area. And here again, the form ID is very important because I want all of the form fields and the WooCommerce checkout to work in unison. Down there, I've got the remove fields from the WooCommerce checkout options. You'll remember I mentioned earlier when we looked at this on the front end, I had a very limited number of fields in here. And this is what drives what fields are displayed. So it's quite important. So if I go down and I click on the plus icon there, you've got a list of all the fields that are available that could or could not be displayed in this WooCommerce checkout. So there's where I control all of the fields. Now over here is the product ID, and this is very important. So if I go back to my products in WooCommerce, this is the product ID. And what's important to note here is that's where I've got the base price that's defined on each of these products. So the WooCommerce widget needs to understand what product I'm basing this on. And as I mentioned earlier, whatever happens after that and whatever drives the total here will overwrite the price that I have in WooCommerce, but I need to specify a base at least. And then based on the value of this total field, that's the value that will drive all of the details inside of the order form. Now, what I mentioned earlier as well is in terms of meta. So I've got custom order item meta activated here, and that's effectively everything that sits within that repeater field that also needs to form part of the calculation. So when I have this activated, there are a couple of things that I need to define here for the widget to know what it needs to add. So first things first, I need to add the repeater, which is everything, and that will be multiplied a number of times. So I create a new item here, and I just need to paste the short code for the repeater or for the field. So here I've gone and done that. I've given the repeater ID. So if I go back over to the repeater field and I look at the form builder repeater, That's my shortcode, so that's the field that I use. If I look at the rest of the fields, I've got a field for iPhone color, so it needs to consider that field. It needs to consider the iPhone capacity, it needs to consider the quantity, and then obviously everything that is inside of that repeater. So that's pretty much it in terms of settings here to build this WooCommerce one-page layout. Now I can do this another way as well, and if you've seen any of the other videos around how to create multi-step forms with Piotnet, it works on exactly the same principle. So what I've gone ahead is I've created an additional demo, which is pretty much the same stuff, but I've removed the one-page checkout from the main page, and I've just added the image, I've added some context, I've added the price, and then a buy now button. And what I've done is I've put a trigger on here to bring a pop-up up. And then what I've done is I've taken all the content from here and I've created separate page templates that contains this on the first template and it contains the checkout on the second template. So as you can see here, I've got all the details that I can select in exactly the same way. I can add quantities, I can add accessories, and everything works in exactly the same way. And if I click on next, there I've got my styled WooCommerce checkout field or widget on the second step. Now, basic stuff, all I've done is I've created a pop-up, as I said. I've created a multi-step form here. And if I head over to the multi-step form area, there are a couple of things that I do slightly differently to the on-page configuration that I showed you in the first part of the video. So again, you have got the form ID, the checkout needs to be the same, so the form ID needs to be the same. And as I said, I created two templates where I put the first part into one template, and I'm specifying the template here. And then I've got the second part, which is the WooCommerce checkout on the second template, and I've also put that template in. Now, in terms of actions after submit for the multi-step form, I need to specify that I want this to go into the WooCommerce checkout. So I click the plus icon there, I select the WooCommerce checkout, and then it brings up an additional menu, which is the WooCommerce checkout. And then same thing, very basic compared to the first one. But here I also need to specify the product ID. And something that I didn't mention before is also the redirect. So if I just quickly jump back over to the first one, just to show you the same thing. If I go over to the content area, you can see here that I've also got a redirect field, which is effectively a page that I can redirect people to after the checkout has completed. Now the same thing applies here. I've got a redirect, so I can put in any page template as a thank you page or any redirect page that I want to specify. And that's all there is to it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you found it useful or helpful, remember to give us a thumbs up, and if you really liked it, leave us a comment below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell for notifications, and stay tuned for more great content. I've put a few links to tools, services, and plugins that I use, including this one, in the description below. Be sure to also grab the coupon code to claim your 10% discount when you buy either Piotnet add-ons or Piotnet Forms. These are affiliate links, and if you make a purchase through one of them, I will receive a commission at no additional cost to you, of course. I only endorse products that I've personally used, and your support helps me put out more great content. So thanks. Bye for now.